Hey game designers, in this video we're going to start the Homer walking animation project. So we're going to use the illustration that we already created, do a few things and get it prepared to be our project. So first thing we're going to do is use a little bit of organization. So all of Homer we're going to put into one folder. And you do this by left clicking the top folder, holding shift and clicking on the last layer that makes up Homer. You click on the new folder button right here, okay, and it will put everybody into one folder. Now let's make sure we give it the proper name. Now the name that we're going to use is dash a dash, which stands for animation. We're going to say Homer frame 1. Okay, so this is the animation convention that we're going to use. We're going to put all the references also in its own layer or its own folder. We're just going to call this references here just to keep everything nice and organized. And now we're going to back up our project. So I'm just going to go in File, and you can go ahead and click Save as PSD. This will save the illustration of that you created. And now we're going to rename this thing. Now, once you save the backup, we're going to rename our new project. Instead of Homer illustration, we're going to call it Homer walking animation. Okay, and I'm just going to put tutorial here. You don't have to do that, just to remind myself that this is the file I'm going to use for the tutorial. And now we're going to update our canvas. So we're going to go to image because we're going to use a reference to do the walking animation. We're going to change this to 5500 pixels by 730. Click OK. Again, this is the number we're going to use because that's kind of how big our reference is going to be. We're going to click OK. And you can see here that our Homer is now chopped off. But don't worry, again, we're going to show you why that is. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go to our classwork tab. And inside the Homer walking animation project, you will see the frames that we're going to use, the reference we're going to use. We're going to click on it. It will open up our reference here. This is the walking sprite animation from the 1990s arcade game. We're going to click on the triple dot here. We're going to open it in a new window. Okay. Now we open a new window. Now we can download the full version here. Once it downloads into your downloads folder, let's go and go back to Photo P. We're going to go to File, Open in Place, and we're going to go look for that animation sheet. Okay. You'll see here that we kind of made it just perfect so that it places where we want it. We're going to go to the Homer frame, and we're just going to drag the reference down a little bit here so that we see Homer on top. So now that we have Homer on top, right, we're going to scale him down. Now, the great thing again about vectors is that it doesn't matter if you're working with low or high quality, your vector illustration will scale indefinitely. So right now what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the corner, okay? So make sure that if you don't see these corners, you click on the move tool and you have transform controls on. Now you can again drag the corner, hold shift, that will keep the scale, okay? And we're gonna move Homer to the first frame of the animation. So let's go ahead and zoom back out. I want to place Homer somewhere over here, and I'm gonna zoom in on Homer. Using the move tool, I'm gonna go ahead and again hold shift, get him to about the same height as the reference that we have here. And this I can go a little bit bigger. I want them to be about the same height. Okay. Now, a couple things before we get started here. First thing we're going to say is that we are not going to do the idle frame for now. If you guys feel intrigued to do the idle frame, you can go and do the idle animation. But the walking cycle that we have here is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 walking animations here. Okay. We probably might do a couple of them in between and kind of show you guys what it looks like when he's over there. So we're gonna again make at least these 9 and probably more. Probably do a frame in between each one. Some of them we'll use twice, and we'll talk about that later. Okay. But go ahead, and now that we have our Homer, all we're going to do now, instead of redrawing every one of these, we are going to duplicate and then alter some of our vectors with the knots and the handles. Now, a couple other things before we start. Again, this is a reference. We do not have to recreate exactly the way it was looked like back in the 90s. Our illustration is definitely more realistic looking, closer to the real Homer, and less pixelated. But we're going to, again, just use it as a reference, mainly for the arms and the legs and the angles. And it's not meant to be perfect. It's not meant to be exactly like the reference, but we're going to use it to kind of guide us here. So again, I created the Homer. I'm going to go ahead and hold Alt and duplicate him and drag him over here. So those of you who are on a computer, if you hold Control using the move, or hold Alt and hold Alt and left click and drag, you can create a duplicate over here. Okay, I'm going to undo that real quickly. Those of you who are on your Chromebooks, right, we can just simply copy or duplicate the layer. After we duplicate the layer, go ahead and move him to over here. And now we actually can start creating the walking animation. Okay, so we have again our first frame, which is the standing position. Okay, and now we can go in here and edit our Homer. Okay, let me make sure I undo that move or redo that move. I was clicking on the wrong layer here. Move him back over here and kind of zoom in here. And now I'm going to kind of set him up kind of where his belly is, kind of look at where his hips are. That's kind of like our reference is mainly the hips, okay? And everything else we're going to move. So what I recommend you do is before this, let's go ahead and rename this. So this is Homer frame 2. We're going to delete the copy and now Homer frame 2. And we're going to do this one piece at a time to make our life easier. So I'm going to go ahead and turn down the opacity of, kind of turn down everybody's opacity down to like 50%. I'm going to go to the right arm only. So I'm going to kind of turn off all the other layers and focus just on the right arm, right? Now I'm going to use the pivot and move the pivot to the shoulder socket here. I can rotate. Now you don't even have to really rotate the pivot. I just do it because that's kind of shows its natural swing. And I'm going to kind of move the arm like this. And so. And now I'm going to kind of, we kind of rotated the arm, right? But the arm, when it's walking, has a slightly more bend, right? So we're going to actually change some of the vectors. Using our path select tool right here, if we select our object, specifically our arm, right? We click here, you can see all the knots. Then with the pen tool, we can now kind of adjust the knots. So we're just going to come here, adjust the elbow a little bit, go over here, adjust the arm, go to the fingers, adjust the fingers. Mainly what I want to see is that you have the elbows a little bit more bent, okay? And maybe fan up the arms, okay? You don't have to follow the fingers exactly the way that the reference has it. Just give it something close and give it some type of look, okay? And that looks good, right? So that kind of finishes the arm. And once you finish the arm, we turn off the arm and we move on to the next limb. So now I'm going to look at the shirt. And the great thing about looking at the shirt is that, we're not going to change much of the shirt, right? The shirt is still the shirt, but you might need to kind of change it based on the um, the the arm position, right? So when you're walking and you're in this position where one leg is in front of the other, right? Your body kind of crunches a little bit. So you're gonna have to kind of take that shirt and move it down a little bit, just to give it the right angle here. And just give yourself a little bit of a lower down. And again, you look at the right arm, you go, is that really where the shoulder is? Maybe you decide you want to move it up a little bit. Okay, again, that's just a reference. You got to do what looks natural to you. Okay, so I think the shoulder should be a little bit higher, not that low. So I move mine a little bit up. Again, it copies the angle, but doesn't necessarily have to match the exact location of it. So I'm gonna put mine a little bit more up here. Okay, and it looks like I'm done with my shirt. So now I want to move on to the probably the lower torso next. Um, Even though the right leg technically is the next layer, but the torso kind of like kind of decides where the legs go. So I'm gonna look at the torso and I go, is this where I want it? I probably want to move it a little bit lower. I still want to connect to the belly here, and that looks good, right? Location of my torso. And now I can move on and do the other layers. Okay. Again, this is just kind of get you guys started here. We're going to work on this for a few days, but you kind of get the idea of how we could edit and start making our walking animation. Okay. All right. That does it for this video. I'll see you guys next video.